For this lecture, I'd like to talk to you all a little bit about David. Now, David is probably the most developed character in the entire Bible, and I would say, in terms of a narrative perspective, you really can't find a more developed character either in the Old Testament or the New Testament. With David, we get a whole array, actually the entire array of human emotions and possibilities, joy, anger. He's a great warrior. He's a great lover. He can be deceitful. He can be political. He can be tricky, and yet he's also a man after God's own heart, right? So he's loved by God too, loved by Yahweh. He in all respects he is a hero, and when we look at these entire narratives, some scholars have come to see that perhaps these stories about David were accumulated and written by his court to promote his kingship. The term for this is royal ideology, and you can really see that this is developed, and yet there also seems to be some intrigue here and a little bit of undercutting David's character. So it's not all positive, ideology. Now, to follow on the lecture with Samuel and Saul, David is anointed by Samuel while Saul is still king. So when Saul loses favor with Yahweh, Samuel anoints David. Yahweh has Samuel anoint David, and you've got a situation in which almost you've got a parallel kingship or two kingdoms operating, and what you've got going on is David increasing in power while Saul becomes increasingly erratic and insane, as we saw in our last lecture. And David, he works his way into Saul's court. In every sense, David is a rock star. He's a rock star. He's a musician, right? He plays harp, and in today's terms, he probably would play rock, heavy metal guitar or maybe not even heavy metal. Just he'd be a guitarist, rock guitarist. He's a beautiful man, right? The women all like him, and he's a great warrior, even as a child. The story about him taking out Goliath, not through necessarily his own power and strength, which was Saul's characteristic, right? Remember, Saul was head and shoulders above all the rest of the Israelites, and Saul's big ability was his strength as a warrior. Well, David is more cunning, and that story about Goliath is to demonstrate David's cunning ability. It's not that he's going to take Goliath on with his own strength, but that he's going to take him out by using alternative means of warfare, by using his slingshot, right? He's an opportunist. He knows how to work his way into power relations. He develops a very close relationship with Saul's son Jonathan. They become very, very thick friends, such thick friends that Jonathan recognizes David's leadership ability, his charisma, and is almost prepared to give him his birthright, his kingdom. Saul's daughter Michal falls in love with David, and David woos her and marries her. He's very popular with the people after slaying Goliath, and when he begins being pursued by Saul, when Saul realizes that what's going on here, David takes off, and he really forms his own army. He takes the side at times. He fights with the Philistines, not necessarily against Israel, but against other enemies. So he becomes kind of a strong man in the area east and south of Judah, and becomes a power in his own right throughout the narrative of 1 Samuel. As I said, Saul and David have this tremendous conflict, and Saul, much of 1 Samuel is about Saul's decline and his trying to take out David. And as I said, David becomes a strong man, creates his own private army and makes his own alliances, and is kind of a bandit leader. Now, eventually, Saul is defeated by the Philistines and dies by his own sword. And David, at this point, he finally can assert his authority, and that's where Second Samuel opens, with David increasing in his power. So again, this is part of this Deuteronomistic theology. Saul's downfall, Saul's desire to control things, meant that he tried to take control of the cult. He starts to usurp Samuel's authority, and wants to have his own blessing. Bless the troops on his own. Doesn't wait. Does the blessing, does the sacrifices when he shouldn't, when he grows impatient waiting upon Samuel. Well, anyway, it's Saul's turning away, right? According to Deuteronomistic, turning away. Yahweh turns his favor away from Saul, and then David is raised up as the Redeemer, and as the blessing for Israel. Now, he very quickly consolidates the unity of his reign over the north and south, and achieves victory over his enemies. It's interesting, when Saul dies, David, he mourns. I mean, he gets, he dresses and gets all sad, and really makes an outward show of mourning Saul's death, but in reality, he had to have been pretty thrilled at the fact that he was now going to have power, and he really is greeted as a rock star, and really through these first chapters in Second Samuel, he can't do any wrong. He marches in. He decides he's going to bring the ark. He's going to establish his own capital city in Jerusalem, and really, is increases his power. He's very good at the show, right? He dances in front of the ark with wild, almost naked abandon. He's half dressed, and his wife Michael's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, hey, look, I'm." She sees all the maidens of Israel watching him, and he's just getting it on, and in front of the ark, and showing off not only his masculine authority as a warrior, but also his priestly authority, right? By being able to consolidate that power, he's tremendous. Of course, he too, according to the Deuteronomistic theologian, sins, right? The turning point for David, I think, is this whole little episode with David and Bathsheba in 2 Samuel, and then eventually David's sons revolt. Absalom revolts against David because David is soft on his other son Amnon, who raped his sister or stepsister Tamar, and David looks the other way, and it's a big family mess in the end. But eventually, at the end of 2 Samuel and the beginning of 1 Kings, David, as an old man, reasserts his authority, and then is able to insert his son by Bathsheba, Solomon, into power. The big text in all of these, I mean, apart from the great story of David and Bathsheba, which is just tremendous fun. The big story, the big text here for the Deuteronomist is 2 Samuel 7. It's this sort of big preach, big sermon, I guess you might call it ancient historians would insert at various places in their history great speeches. And this speech by Nathan to David, where he basically prophetically tells David that he will have a throne, an heir on his throne forever. Here in 2 Samuel 7, "Go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, are you ready to build me a house to live in? No, I've not lived in a house since the day I brought up the people of Israel from Egypt to this day, but I've been moving about in a tent and a tabernacle. Wherever I have moved about among all the people of Israel, did I ever speak a word with any of the tribal leaders of Israel whom I commanded to shepherd my people of Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be prince over my people Israel, and I've been with you wherever you went, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and I will make you a great name, like the name of the great ones on the earth. And I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, so that they may live in their own place, and be disturbed no more, and evildoers shall afflict them no more as formerly. From the time that I appointed judges over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. Moreover, the Lord declares you that the Lord will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled, and you lie down with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. And the text goes on and on. It's a great text. It's a messianic text for those of us who believe that this text was fulfilled in Jesus. But really the promise is that, David has this dream, and he decides he wants to build a house. He wants to, he wants to show his power by building a temple for the ark. And the idea is that God, no, I'm not going to give you that power, but I'm going to allow your son Solomon to build a temple for me, and you will have an heir on your throne forever. And this is the big promise, the big covenant, one of the big covenants in the Old Testament, and for Christians, it is the biggest covenant, because it's the covenant in which God promises an heir on David's throne forever. Well, that heir is for us who are believers is Jesus Christ. So this is a messianic text, at least for Christians. For the Jews, it's still unfulfilled, right? They're still expecting that heir back. But this is a huge text, and in this whole cycle, and it really shows the level to which David is held, the high esteem to which the Deuteronomist holds David. Really, for the Deuteronomist, if Solomon is at the high point because he was allowed to build the temple, David is close to that high point, although he does have his faults. So great stuff here. Like I said, David is a complex and well-developed character. He is a musician, right? Plays harp for Saul. He's a poet, composes the Psalms, and he's a rock star. He's a gifted warrior and tactician. He extends the boundaries of Israel to be their largest point. He defeats the enemies all around him, and he consolidates his power, conquers Jerusalem, makes it his capital, and brings the Ark of Yahweh to Jerusalem so that his son Solomon actually can then build that Ark. He establishes a kingdom that lasts probably a good 400 years, that dynasty, which is an interesting development in the ancient Near East. The other thing that's really, really interesting, and you'll see this on the Nova video and in your readings, that David is the first historical figure that we have in the Old Testament. And by that I mean he is the first figure that we have data for, we have evidence of his kingdom outside of the biblical story, right? As the video shows, it's stunning. We've really, in the past couple of decades, stunning. We found archaeological evidence with an inscription with the Kingdom of David on it, which is amazing. The House of David. Wow. So that's pretty cool. So really, all of this is happening around say 1000 BC, 1040 BC, somewhere in there. And that's pretty huge. And also, the thing to note is this is a time when both Egypt and the kingdoms to the north in Babylon are very, very weak. So David is able to fill a power vacuum in the Levant, in the ancient Near East. And he and Solomon, when they establish their kingdom, they're able to thrive and grow because Egypt and Babylon are not so powerful, not so strong, able to exploit the people in the land of Israel. So he's a fascinating figure all around. I hope you'll enjoy watching the videos this week and getting into the readings. He's great fun.